Despite the fact that it's practically morning in America, President Biden's approval rating is dipping, and the Washington Post and Yahoo News and many others are absolutely mystified. What could the reason be? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, there's a story on Yahoo News under the headline, "Is Biden really getting an unfair shake from the media?" I don't know if I've heard the phrase unfair shake before. I've heard of fair shakes. But in essence, the upshot of it is that despite the fact that we are experiencing, in the writer's terms, a booming economic recovery, despite the fact that the president has been promoting his extremely popular legislative agenda, and that's a quote, nevertheless, his popularity rating continues to dip. The 538, which does all the polling and analysis of politics, right now has the president at a 51.7% disapproval, 43.6% approval. And they muse that several things could be responsible for this. Number one, just poor messaging from the White House. Number two, obstructionists in Congress, particularly within the Democratic Party. But number three, Bill Whittle, the Washington Post did a study of thousands of headlines, and they find that the coverage of Joe Biden reflected in those headlines is actually more negative than it was during the same 4-month period that they looked at from the previous year when Donald Trump was president of the United States. Is it possible that the media, as you pointed out in a recent episode of The Virtue Signal, the progressives and the left are historically known for their cannibalism? Is it possible that the reason why Joe Biden is so unpopular is that they are eating themselves?
No, that's not possible. What's really going on here is the corrupt news media that basically pulled him over the line. And when I say pulled him over the line, I'm not forget the voting thing. Things like suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop and all the rest of this tailwind they gave him isn't working because people are forced now to decide whether what they hear on CNN is true or what their own lying eyes are telling them. And so they're really running out of excuses, Scott. They can't think of anybody else to blame, so they've decided to blame themselves. They're kind of throwing themselves on the sword and saying, you see, it's the media's too tough on Biden. That's why nobody likes him. It's because we've been too tough on them, which has an ancillary kind of a run-on effect of them thinking that it buys them some credibility back. We're actually tougher on Biden than we are on Trump. My God, how incredible we are. But here's what I find interesting about this. Excuse me while I put on my thinking spectacles. One of the things that I really like to do, and I'm doing this in real time, so maybe I'll get bitten by this, but nevertheless, here we go. On Instagram, the famous conservative platform, I subscribe to the White House news feed, and I don't subscribe to it because of what the White House has to say. I subscribe to it because of what the people have to say. So right now I'm looking at this. President Biden announces new actions to battle Omicron. I'm doing this in real time. Let's just read some comments, just a few. FJB. Somebody said thank you. Trump won and let's go Brandon. Let's go Brandon and all his supporters. Clown face. Many faces of people crying with laughter. Many clown faces. Good luck. Can we get a study on how people who have had COVID and recovered? Another clown face. Literally can't with this. Crying with laughter. New World Order depopulation agenda. Here's a heart in favor of. Let's not forget another lockdown to slow the spread, but what do I know? And on and on and on. Oh, here's a one that's just nothing but clown faces and poop emojis. And my point is that this is not the Fox News interpretation. This isn't Tucker Carlson's Instagram feed. This is the White House's Instagram feed, and it is 95% negative. Let's not forget the story we did not too long ago where YouTube decided that the only way that they could protect Biden's reputation was to eliminate the thumbs down option, that you could no longer downvote videos anywhere on YouTube. They said that was because little guys are getting bandied around. But the reason that they did that was that there was no way they could cover up the fact that when the White House produces a statement from the White House, it gets, 129 upvotes and 55,942 downvotes. That's evidence. And this is contra-narrative. And so it's got to be countered. So basically what they're saying now is, well, he's an amazing success. And all you have to do is just drive around the country in your $5.35 a gallon gasoline, which is what I paid last night, and just to see what a tremendous success he is. So obviously there's something wrong with the American people. There's just something wrong with them. And maybe it's us. Maybe we've just been too tough on old Joe. And I don't believe it. And I'll tell you what this reminds me of, Scott. When you hear the gatekeepers, when you hear the foxes setting up the integrity of the henhouse defense perimeter report, this reminds me of this old saying that says, the brain is the most important organ in the body. Says the brain.
Stephen Green, there's a reporter named Eric Levitz, who I've never heard of before, but he's somewhere out there in the great state of New York. And he says media biases have been a real problem for Biden, but so have objective realities. Is this more to the point that it's not necessarily that the news media is being unfair to the president of the United States? They're always unfair to the president of the United States. But in fact, events are not cooperating with the message the White House would prefer to circulate.
Yeah, Ayn Rand said something like, if two things seem impossible, check your premises. One of them is wrong. And the wrong thing is that the wrong premise is that Joe Biden is somehow deserving of a high public approval. Let's look at the facts here. They talk about this booming economy. Okay, fine. Take away inflation, and it's not booming. We've seen wages shrink every month for at least the past 3 months. That's real. That's real, and it's due to spending. Says Milton Friedman taught us many years ago, all inflation is monetary, and that is the government printing up money we don't have. Let's look at the joblessness. Yeah, we've seen some great job months, but we are still 4.2 million jobs shy of the pre-pandemic total, and a big chunk of that is because of Washington paying people not to work. Another part of it has to do with the supply chain crisis, and a lot of it is in California. A lot of that is due to AB 5 that basically outlawed independent trucking. A lot of it has to do with ships that we knew were coming and didn't plan for. We had a Secretary of Transportation who was on maternity leave as this whole thing unfolded. There's nothing you can look at and say the administration is doing a good job with this. They can't even message very well because their messenger is not very capable anymore of even getting through a teleprompter presentation. And as Bill noted in our previous segment, this administration from top to bottom is mean-spirited. They are hectoring. They're yelling at us as though it's our fault we don't support this guy. Well, objective reality says he doesn't deserve our support, Scott.
Well, even though I went to school to get a journalism degree, so-called, which is really a liberal arts degree with a few credits of journalism thrown in for good measure, far be it from me to clap the media on the back and say, good job at your objective reporting about the presidency because you say negative things no matter who's in office. I have never really turned to the mainstream media with the expectation that I was going to get unbiased reportage from anybody. It's pretty rare when you stumble upon somebody who does that. And usually they're doing like human interest stories about the autistic kid who, made a basket when he got to play in the varsity game. Those are the only good news stories that I've seen. So I'm not expecting much of the news media. Every president since George Washington has complained about the bias of the media and their negative focus. And so that's just kind of part of the job. I think that the Biden administration, for anything else you might want to say about them ideologically or their agenda, has one fundamental problem, which many administrations have suffered from, and that is that we have promoted a guy to an executive position who has no executive experience. And this is problematic throughout the history of the country. Every time you take a congressman or a senator and move him into the Oval Office, he's a fish out of water. He doesn't know what to do. He's never had to make those kind of decisions. Even if he had to run a substantial sized senatorial office staff, he really had a guy or gal who did that for him. And so he really doesn't have any experience in running anything, nor does he have the thick skin that you develop over time if you're, let's say, a business executive or a governor or even a mayor of a decent sized city. You need to be able to make decisions and take accountability for those decisions. You can't slough that off on the body, so to speak. You can't say, well, I was in there fighting for you, but it's those other senators or those other representatives who did not, toe the line and do what they were supposed to do. You actually have to absorb that onto yourself and stand up and say, hey, Afghanistan, my fault. Inflation, my fault. Failure of the Build Back Better agenda, my fault. I didn't do it right. I failed at this and I'm learning from this, and I will change my approach so that I can be successful, or I'll change my objectives so that they can be more in line with what the people want as expressed through their legislators. That's the problem here. It's not negative media coverage. Everybody's had negative media coverage. It's actually negative news being generated by a guy who's in a position that he's never had to do in his entire life. And we can go back through the history of the presidency and see over and over, and we don't have to go too far back to find a senator who was way out of his depth. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.
Now, if we could only find a thick-skinned business executive, we'd be in business.